Joining me today, I have Jonathan Maracle. He's joining us from the Tyendinaga Mohawk territory out in Ontario, Canada. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jonathan.
So good to be here. It's gonna
Yeah,
go up.
so you are a Mohawk singer songwriter. You're the founder of Broken Walls, and you are going to be coming to Manitoba, actually, specifically Niverville, in just a little bit for this coffee, dessert, and free concert, which we are going to get into this event. But before that, I would love to hear a little bit more about yourself, if that's all right.
Sure. I'm son of Andrew Miracle, who was a missionary for about 55 years to Native communities across North America. I grew up in Akwesasne, Mohawk Territory, which is down near Cornwall, and my father was a missionary there at the time. And for me, as a young man, it had its difficult moments because, as you can see, I sort of look Caucasian. I have blue eyes and white skin. My mother was English, Scottish, and Welsh, and I picked up her looks and tone. Um, and it didn't set well because I lived on a reservation with mostly dark-skinned people, and my father spoke fluent Mohawk, and I spoke a little bit of Mohawk, but it was very difficult because I was picked on because I was different. And so, um, it set in my heart that I wasn't good enough. And so for many years as a kid, I didn't like who I was. So I was very upset with that. And I took lots of black eyes and fat lips and bloody noses. And I had a kid hit me on the back of the head with a brick. And I had 7 stitches across the back of my head just because I didn't fit in. Uh, so I loved being a Mohawk. I loved growing up as a Mohawk, and I was proud to be a Mohawk, but I didn't look like a Mohawk. And so that set
Mm.
a very awful tone in my life. But, later on in my life, uh, I was, I gave my heart to Jesus. Uh, and I was going to commit suicide in California, in Hollywood, California. I was a rock and roll singer, and I had decided that I no longer wanted to put up with the way things were, and I had made up my mind to do that. But my dad had said to me before I left Canada, he said, "When your back's against the wall and you have nowhere to turn, call it on Jesus." And I did. And the phone rang, and it was my dad. And it was 2.5 years since I had talked to him. And so for me, it was a lifesaver. And my father didn't come to see me. He switched the ticket and he brought me to see him and my mom. And so I spent the week with them, and they went to church one day and they asked me if I'd come with them. And I said, I don't want to go to church. I don't like hypocrisy and all that stuff. And I was a rock and roller. I was a heavy metal singer in California, so I wasn't an easy subject to work with. And mom and dad treated me really good all week, fed me all the best food. My mom just did everything for me that she knew I loved as a kid, and it was had its did its job on me because when they finally went to church on Sunday, she leaned her head in the door in the bedroom I was sleeping in and said, "You want to come with us today?" And I thought, geez, she's been so good to me. I'm going to have to go. So I got up, and there I was in the back seat of the car, and they pulled into the parking lot, and they didn't say anything to me. They just went in, and I sat in the car, and it felt as though I had the devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder. One was saying, "You don't want to go in there and be with all those hypocrites." And the angel would say, "Your mom loves you so much and she's so happy that you're here. You need to go in." So I had this big argument going on, and I sat there for like 15 minutes. So they must have thought I wasn't coming. And then I opened the door and I walked in, and everybody was already in the church. It was already going, except there was this one little old lady, maybe about 80 years old, standing in the foyer. And she walked right over to me, and she just looked at me and she says, "I love you." And I said, "Why do you love me?" She goes, "Because Jesus told me to." And, that was my moment of transition. I didn't, she didn't read Romans 10:9 and 10. She didn't, try to get me to quote any scriptures or to say anything, but I just felt that love. I felt the love. I didn't know what it was, and it just seemed to wash over me. And I, at that moment, I believe I was saved. And I went in and I sat in the back seat. I didn't hear what the pastor said, but I knew something had changed. And so I began to seek God. And I went to a church, and I guess the interesting part is next, that I went to a church shortly thereafter. When I came home, I moved back to Canada, and the pastor came up to me and told me that in order to have Jesus, I had to give up my Mohawk heritage. And I looked at him, and I was thinking, I've been all my life wrestling with this. He said, but you can't be a heathen and have Jesus. You have to give up your Mohawk heritage. And I was brokenhearted because I was raised by a dad who loved Jesus. My dad always said this. He said, when I gave my heart to Jesus, I became a better Mohawk. He said, I didn't give up being a Mohawk. And so, but this pastor was somebody he was really cool. Like I liked him because he loved God so much and he loved Jesus so much and he represented that. And I had been going to his church for about 6 to 8 weeks. To be fair, he set a wonderful standard of loving God. And I thought, I want to love God just like he does. So when he told me that, I made a choice, and I let my Mohawk heritage go in lieu of having Jesus in my life. And so for 10 years, I sought God as a don't know what, because there's not many people groups who have to give up being who God called them to be in order to have Jesus, because Jesus is a free gift, right, for all men. And so he was mistaken in that. Even though he was a lovely man, he was mistaken, but it really affected me. But 10 years into that, I met, I was actually asked to come and sing at the Sacred Assembly with Elijah Harper. And at the Sacred Assembly, I'm sitting there and they asked me to come and sing Amazing Grace in Mohawk. When they first asked me, I said, no. I said, I can't do that. I said, I don't play the drum and I don't sing in my language anymore. I said, because that was the prerequisite to me accepting Jesus. And Elijah's people, they said, well, that's wrong. You need to be who you were created to be, and we want you to come and sing Amazing Grace in Mohawk for us. And there was hundreds of people there at the Sacred Assembly, and I sat there right before I was supposed to sing Amazing Grace. This elder was speaking. His name was John Sanford, and John Sanford has written lots of books about inner healing and stuff. And he said, his quote was, there are walls of bitterness that are built in the hearts of the indigenous people of the world because of the onslaught of colonialism against them. And he said, these walls of bitterness must be broken. And at that very moment, I just got this major download. And I'm just sitting there. My eyes are full of tears, and I'm a songwriter. And I penned the song Broken Walls right on the spot. And when they called me up to sing, I said, I apologize. I said, I'm a man who loves to follow the rules and follow the guidelines and follow the authority over me. I said, but I've got to sing this song that I've just written. And so I sang this song, and this lady standing behind me put her hand on my shoulder. When I was done, she said, can I say something to the people? And she said, my family discovered that our grandmother was a Cree, and she said we hid that from everybody. We didn't want anybody to know that the Cree blood had polluted our veins in our family. And she said, I'm so sorry. I feel so terrible. We were so arrogant. She said, will you please forgive me and my family for our attitude? And she was crying just like a child that had just had a good spanking. And a native girl in the far side of the auditorium stood up and she said, I'm Danae from the Northwest Territories. And she threw her fist in the air and she said, I forgive you, like that, to that lady. And then the whole place, everybody across the whole auditorium started crying and calling out to God, please forgive us for our offense and our attitudes towards one another. And then this native man came up from the back, walked all the way up from the back, and he walked slow and he was kind of looking at the ground. And when he got up there, he introduced himself as a chief and said, I've always hated white people for what they've done to my people. He said, but today I never want to hate white people again. Please forgive me. And it went on for almost 2 hours, people confessing their unforgiveness, their offenses. And that was the beginning of Broken Walls. And that's the band that I had the vision for all that's been going on. We've recorded 14 albums, and we've been touring all over the world. We've played in China, we've played across Europe, South America, Central America, North America. We've crisscrossed it hundreds of times. And I aligned with a organization in Alaska called Carry the Cure, and Carry the Cure is a mission, suicide prevention. And so we go into high schools and we do daytime assemblies to rescue the kids, and then we do evening concerts called A Call to the Generations. And so and that opens the door for the whole community to come. And so we've been doing that for almost 20 years. And prior to that, I was doing Broken Walls for 10 years. So I've been 30 years doing just that vision that I received at the Sacred Assembly. My whole life, everything changed that day. And that's all I've done since then. And I met Roger like 20 years ago. And Roger he was really wonderful, just the nicest guy. I mean, I never met such a nice guy. He just rolled out the carpet, fed me when I needed to eat, took me home, let me stay at his house, and when we were passing through his area. And he called me a few weeks ago and he said, Jonathan, I know we haven't talked in a long time. He said, but now is the time. We need to do something. And so he asked me if I would come and do this event. And so my team's flying in from from Alaska and from Texas, and we're all coming in, and we're gonna land-based Neverville.
I love it. So that's actually my own community, even though I work in Winnipeg and I talk about Winnipeg a lot. It's
Yeah.
where I live, and that's why I know
Okay.
Roger Armbruster as well.
Well, I
Um,
gave you a lot there.
I love it. Jonathan, thank you so, so, so much for sharing your heart and your life story. I know that's probably even just a glimpse, but I really appreciate it. Um, I'll ask you just one more question, if that's all right.
Sure.
Um, why is it important for people, especially believers in Jesus, to attend an event like this one in Niverville, celebrating a day for national truth and reconciliation?
This will open your heart. Um, Across Canada, our Native people suffer. One out of every two children lives in abject poverty. We still have over 60 communities that have to have boil water advisories. We have communities where 50 below zero, our Native people still have to go outside and use the outhouse. It's just unbelievable the suffering that has taken place among our Native people. Well, in Winnipeg, the inner city there. There's so many struggles and hardships. I've been in there. I've been in the safe house where people that are in the gangs have to go in order to get a break from everything that's going on around them. It's the only neutral zone. And I've been there. I've been there and I've ministered to men in the safe zone. And I've been into prisons and all different kinds of places. Our people need to have their self-respect restored. And that self-respect is so important because even right now we have Native communities all across our Canadian North where our young people are committing suicide. And we're seeing anywhere from, I had one village I went to that had 16 suicides in 1 year. And it was a small village at the time. There was about 2,400 people. And 16 suicide kept the whole village in mourning, constant mourning. Every time they just start to heal up from one, another one would happen. And moms committed suicide because their children committed suicide, and the poor dad is left to raise the rest of the children. And I mean, I don't want to paint the most terrible picture, but it is a very, very bad situation in so many places. I mean, there's a lot of good going on, and ever since the discovery in Kamloops when they found 215. Um, that was an eye-open experience that finally Canada could not dismiss, because Canada had dismissed it up until then. But see, as First Nations people, we knew our children were being stolen. We knew our children had been picked up and taken away to residential school without our agreement on it, and they would disappear out of the front yard and we never saw them again in so many cases. I have one of my friends that's coming to this concert is going to be a girl that her dad saw the agents coming to take his children, and he went out the back door with his gun, and they moved into the woods, and she was raised in the bush because her father wouldn't give her up to the agents that had come to take her to residential school. I mean, this is the type of things that regular Canadians have no idea. But finally, after the discovery of the 215, now native regular Canadians are asking the questions and saying, well, why did this happen? And how come we didn't know about it? And the government successfully hid it, and the church successfully hid it, because they were both in collusion to do this. And so I believe that the music that we sing, we don't sing all desperate music. Like, what we do is we sing to build relationship and to open the door of understanding and communication. We sing to um, raise awareness, but to do it with love, and using forgiveness as one of our main weapons of war, because when forgiveness takes place, healing begins. And that's what we need to see, is the healing take place. And so that's what we're all about. Broken walls. Break the chains of bitterness.
You are such an inspiration. I'm so glad we were able to connect, Jonathan. Thank you
Yeah,
for
me too.
taking the time
Yeah.
to share your heart and your history and how important that this is. I really appreciate it. And I do pray a blessing upon you as you continue to travel. And then welcome, of course, to our hometown of Niverville
I
coming
can
up.
hardly wait. I can hardly wait. I
Yeah,
haven't seen Roger in a long time.
wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
thank you again. God bless you in all that you do. And we're going to share this with our listeners. So thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia.